Okay, Brad from Eastcoastangel. I'm going to start doing videos on complete teardowns of the Angel family as I get them in. I'm going to go through each platform completely. That way you can see how I do it. If you feel like that you want to try it out and you want to do it yourself, then awesome. If you want to have me do it, then I'm always open for business. I take on everything from LEDs up to A1s and the SB platform. Right now I'm going to take down a Rasta A1 fly, and this is honestly the only way that I would recommend you breaking down a an A1. It's the only way that I do it. First off, we start out with the grips. You take off the passenger side grip first, because that's where all the wires and whatnot are. I'm not going to do any shortcuts or anything like that. You're going to see everything as I do it here in house. So we have this one. Again, you want to be very careful when removing the eye ribbons. Everyone knows they're pretty brittle. Angel didn't make they didn't make the most rugged eye setups. Then after that, you want to remove the macro. Sometimes you can remove it from the mini reg here. It's a little bit easier than from the ASA, but either way it all comes out. I've taken the wires off, the solenoid wire. A lot of people ask me which hex keys I use when taking apart Angels. I like the ball end. As you can see, when you're undoing like the frame, they swivel, they stay out of the way. They're really easy to get in there. You don't have to keep taking it out, putting it back in. I think that's usually what happens when stuff gets stripped, besides over tightening. Is just them not being seated properly before you go ahead and turn them. So there's that. There's that. Typically the trigger in a fly will come apart. Don't be worried or scared. It's normal, especially if you're just taking these apart recently. The one thing I like to see is if the trigger is loose enough to the bearings and the trigger on the flies are loose enough to return on their own and kind of swivel back and forth. This one is in great shape. The marker itself was in good shape. This one's being sent in along with 5 other A1 platform guns. Guy just pretty much wants them all to be cleaned up and ready to go. But here's that right there. And what you'd want to do is, if you want to remove the board, there's 3 screws, and then you just use a small Phillips screwdriver. You remove those screws, the board will lift out and will come completely free. One thing you want to do is you never want to try to remove the board when it's physically still on the gun with the trigger in there. It won't work. The trigger leaf goes in too far. Some people have tried to remove those the boards, or tried to do some other kind of work inside the frame without removing the board first. Without removing the frame from the gun first, and therefore they've caused themselves damage. This one right here has got the rabbit board in it, which is significantly rarer, and also it's got the micro switch and everything like that. You definitely don't want to go damaging this if you have to. Again, we also have right here, we have the ASA. I'm going to take that apart, show you how that works. The front of it screws off. Then you'll see you have a pin right here. All you have to do is take one of the O-rings off. The pin usually will just slide right out. Then on the inside of here you have a round barrel, which has a couple of O-rings. Sometimes you can this will move out, come out of here pretty easily. I use Leatherman's tool for those, because it's got, the ends are splined a little bit, which allows it to grab, and then it pulls out. There is no worry of damage on this item right here, because it's just drilled holes. They're not threaded or anything else like that. But as you can see here, this O-ring is definitely going to need to be replaced. You can see it's all, it's just sitting there standing upright. It's all gooey. It's nasty. This usually happens from the oil that can be just right from the factory. With these guns sitting for however long that they do, you'll get the O-rings will literally turn to jelly. And also this O-ring on here is physically, you can see it's stuck to that post. It actually just came apart in my fingers, which isn't going to help you at all. If you notice, if there's ever any issue with ASA leaks, it's not sealing up properly or whatever else like that, there's only 2 O-rings. There's a small little O-ring that fits inside there, and an O-ring on this barrel, and that's it. One of those is going to be bad, unless of course it's your fitting. If it's your fitting, you'll be able to tell almost right away. A lot of the times too, people don't realize, if you look at this macro, and you can see it's cut square. If you get one that's cut and it's cut at an angle, or it's damaged, even this right here, honestly, I'm going to replace, because if you look at it really closely, you can see there's already starting to get a real heavy groove right here, which I don't like. Most of the time, this stuff will fail. A lot of people will blame it on the ASA, or the macro fitting, which it just isn't true. It's usually, I don't know even know how much this would be, $1 worth of macro line. So replace that as soon as it starts getting a little ragged. Next step up, I usually like to take off all of the stuff that's on the body itself. With this particular model, it's a fly, so it comes with a separate detachable reg, and a different reg ASA. A regular A1 would have just one, regular regulator here, which taking that one apart's a little bit different. Sometimes these are only on finger tight. This one's not. This one has a little bit more, a little bit more to it. Most of the time, though, these can be taken apart. If you see, just an Allen key, just that, and you grip it, because it's got grooves, on the regulator. You can grip it. You can go like this. If you look at this regulator really, this end cap really closely, you can see somebody marred it all up with a, probably a set of vice grips or a set of adjustables. You don't need to do it, because inside there, if you can see, it's hex keyed. It will literally, a hex key will drop right inside, right, and then there you go. You can undo it almost, it's almost finger tight. That's usually all this should be anyway. There's one O-ring right there. Then again, your fitting. If you ever have to remove this fitting, there is, on most of the other Angel regulators, there's a hex key here. This one, there is not. So if you're going to use any sort of gripping item on here to get the fitting out, you're going to want to take it and you're going to want to wrap it with something. You can use anything. You could use, I like these cloths. They're nice and yellow and gaudy, but you take them and you can put them around here, and then I can clamp something on there and I don't damage the piece that I'm looking to do. These things are really hard to come by. You're not going to find them, just at most shops. So you got to keep them in good shape. And then you have your regulator, which you use your velocity adjuster size hex key. Take the regulator out first. The adjustment screw, sorry about that. And then, as you can see, you've now got that. Now, how do you get that out, right? Some people will say you just bang it on something or whatever else like that. Well, yeah, but then you may end up damaging this lip here. Personally, I use the Angel toolkit. If you don't have one of these, try to find one. Pick one up. If somebody's got one for sale and you've got you know, an A1, you're going to want one of these. Look, it's got the little threaded, you know, L-shaped tool. You just take it, and you can pull out that. You know, I can tell right away that the grease that's used in this is excessive. You can see it's kind of just gummed up. It's just, you know, layered right in there. You don't need that much. These O-rings just sealed. Nothing moves, you know, in here. Everything that moves is inside here. You know, I mean, the housing itself, it's pretty clean, but that is just excessive. There's no reason for that at all. You know, which is the reason why we're breaking all this down, you know, to get these guns, you know, back up and going. Essentially, we're all done with the housing. You can put that off to the side. Now you have this right here. A lot of people ask me, well, how do you get the pistons out? Well, you know, first off, just get all the excess of grease off here. There's, like I said, this thing's loaded. I don't know what they used, but it's just, there's a ton of it. You know, I'm from the old school where you put a little bit on it, and you know, if it works, you know, and it seals up and it lubes what it needs to, then great. You don't need to go, you know, crazy with the, you know, with the lube, you know, with the grease or oil. A lot of people will put a lot of oil in stuff. I personally am not a big fan of oil myself. I find if something's leaking or if something needs any sort of lubrication, that I need to take it apart at that point and start looking at it. I take my Leatherman, I take this. Now, I usually do that. Usually it taps out. Now, sometimes it doesn't. So, again, you can use the L-shaped tool. It'll grab onto it on the inside. The inside, again, there's absolutely nothing in there that you can necessarily damage that's going to hurt it. You know, that's going to hurt that. It's just a passageway. You know, if something's, you know, placed in there to grab onto the inside, then it's fine. You know, it's not going to ruin anything. You know, I mean, there is a point where it becomes excessive. And as you can see, the inside of the piston O-rings, there's a little one right there, another one right here. These shims, a lot of people, you know, ask me to do the high pressure mod so they can run a high pressure tank on their A1s. I personally don't recommend it. I recommend getting a different tank most of the time, because of the fact that when you start doing mods and stuff like that, from what I've seen, it wears down parts. You know, and you know, there can be some argument there. Well, you know, there's a reason why they do the mod and this and that. Yes, it's because people are typically too cheap to buy a low pressure tank or sell their high pressure tank and use their low pressure tank. Most of the guns nowadays run off of low pressure anyway. I run all of my Angels off of low pressure, including an LCD, IR3, whatever. You know, low pressure works fine for all of those guns. But then again, there's that. You want to keep an eye on it if you don't want to, you know, go through the manual and restack that. You know, the shims, then, you know, just keep an eye on it when you pull it out. Now, there is a small piston in there, small little brass piston with a rubber piece on it and a ball. This one takes a little bit more typically to get out. The one thing that you can do, if you're noticing, I mean, that's almost out anyway, but if you're having a difficult time with it, and a lot of people will lose, you know, they'll get frustrated or whatever, you can take an Allen key. You can take it, you can put it inside there, and you push down a little bit, and you can get the ball to push the piston down, and then you'll see it in this window. And if it's far enough down, you can also put the hex key in that window, and you can push the, you know, the piston out also. But that's what you're going to get right there. Both of those are actually in good shape, which is always a good thing, which tells me that, you know, the reg itself wasn't to blame for the leak on this particular A1 fly. And then after that, you just have 4 O-rings on the outside. You know, you can do a visual check of them, make sure that there's no nicks. Most of the time when you're getting any sort of nicks or anything like that, it's because the inside of that housing is threaded. And what will happen is, when you go to put this in, sometimes you'll put it in crooked, or you'll force it in. Maybe there's not, there's no grease on this at all, or maybe there's some debris or something in the threads, and you force it in, and sometimes we'll nick one of the O-rings. Trust me, after you get this completely put back together, put it on your gun, and realize at that point that you had nicked one of these, it's a pain. So definitely take care, with that when you go to take that apart and putting it back together. The next thing I do is I go and I take off the ASA adapter. It's real simple. There's only one screw. It's pretty decent sized, and then you just pull that right off. Now, a lot of people don't realize there's a triangular shaped seal in there. If that seal is flattened, meaning if you're getting any sort of leaks from this part of your body right here, okay, that seal has probably been flattened, which means somebody has probably tightened the screw that's inside this to the point where it now the seal doesn't have any sort of flexibility, doesn't rebound, there's no memory left to it, in which case you need that replaced. I mean, they're super cheap. And they're pretty readily available through PB Sports. I have them myself here also. The next thing I do is I like to take the the front. This one's got the Magno setup. It's hex threaded, so all you do is you just put it in there, you undo that. It comes out pretty decent. Sometimes the valve stem inside will just drop right out. This one won't. It's no big deal. I take the this has a 3-piece eye covers on it, which some people like them. I personally I've found that there's I'm 50-50 on these, mainly because they're not as tight as the 1-piece eye cover, so they don't hold the eyes in all the time as well as the 1-piece. But they are nicer. As you saw, they just come right apart. The 1-piece, you have to get your fingers inside the the eye recesses, and you literally have to pry them out, which can be kind of a pain. And I understand people wanting easier access and whatnot. I mean, it doesn't get any easier than that. Now we have access to the eyes. Most of the time, you won't have this little piece in here. It's a small little rubber piece that holds the eyes right tight to the wall. Most of the time that little piece is usually gone, gets lost. I remove the eyes. I put them off to the side somewhere where they're not going to get squished. They're not going to get something put on them that's going to damage them. Mainly because those are like $40–45, and I mean, if you don't need to replace your eyes, then why take the chance of them getting damaged? The next piece that I like to remove is the front plug retaining pin, which not a lot of people are familiar with. I've seen a lot of people damage the front of this gun, and break off these tabs and stuff because they don't know that there's a pin down in here, in which there is. Clearly I just grabbed the wrong size thread tool, but the pin is down in there. You just thread your smaller threaded L-shaped tool into it, and then pull it out. Now, I have seen people have a lot of problems with these pins getting stuck inside the front of the guns. I understand that completely. If there's ever an issue, you may have to just use a little bit more power. You may need to, after you get this threaded in, you may need to clamp onto it, using a pair of vice grips or other pliers to be able to pull, that out. I've had to physically do that before, where I've had to clamp on a pair of pliers, because the pin was just frozen right inside there. After I got it out, I wire wheeled it, made sure I greased it properly, and away I went. Now that the front pin is out of the way, again, I love my Leatherman tool. I've had this thing for a long time. It does a lot of really cool things. One thing that it does and it helps me do is I take this, and if you can see, there's a little bit of a lip right here on that on the front end of the plug, and if you see, and if you watch, you can put that right in there, It's just a little tab right on the corner, and you just use your leverage, and that's all you need to do. It takes that plug right out. Okay, I've seen a lot of people mangle these. I've seen people damage the inside of the grooves. I've seen people break off these tabs. You know, you can see I'm taking this gun apart. I haven't swore once. It hasn't, you know, gotten me upset. You know, I mean, granted, there are some that do, but not this one. And again, sometimes the you know, the stem will come out. This one has a D-light stem in it. You know, which if you want simplicity, right here is it. It's a plastic, you know, replacement stem. The only thing that you know, is an issue a lot of the times, the magnet will come out. You can super glue that back in. These also do leak for about 2 cases of paint until they break in properly and conform to the valve body. You know, I mean, I don't necessarily agree with, you know, swapping out a part and having to wait that long. But the fact of the matter is, it's life. It's just the way it is. Now after that, I have the valve body pin that I remove. I have the LPR body pin that I remove, and then I have the ram body pin that I remove on the back. I do all of that, and you're going to see why in just a minute. The next step is you got to remove the back plate. Again, people over tighten the backs of these. There's really no reason to over tighten the back of these. You know, this doesn't seal anything other than the plate being put on the back. You know, there's no physical, there's no O-ring, there's no sealing properties to these. You don't need to over torque these. The next thing that I do is I pull out the, well, typically, sorry about that, typically pull out the bolt first. Then I pull out the ram. If you're having a hard time pulling the ram out from the front, I mean from the back, you can just take a hex key, you can put it in the slot and push the ram back. There's no reason that you would ever have to take anything to the back of this knob and grab onto it. You know, if you can't do it with your fingers, again, go right through the slot, push it back. You don't need to damage. This is an $80 ram. It's a Magno ram. It's, you know, better flow, lighter hammer, you know, just a better design. You don't want to go damaging these, especially all the A1 flies are Magnoed, so you're going to have these parts. This is a booster 2 bolt. The way that you can tell the difference between them, it's got a blue aluminum insert in them. The other ones look like the traditional regular bolt that comes in there, you know, in the A1s and some of the A1 flies. It's black, but the other one, the booster 1, can be, you know, white, but it's got a soft face on the front. It doesn't have the blue insert. This is a booster 2. Okay, so now we've got, you know, literally we're down to like the bare bones. This is where people end up damaging a very expensive part. If you look, you can see I've got wires dangling down here, but I also have an LPR that needs to come out from the back. What do? Take the solenoid cover off first. I don't mean to, you know, make it sound like, you know, duh, but trust me, I've had a lot of people that have emailed me and been like, I just chopped my wires off my solenoid, what do I do? Well, it's not the end of the world, you could resolder them, but if you're not good at resoldering, then you at that point have to make a decision, you know, buy another solenoid. At, you know, if you can get them, they can be, you know, between $60 and $100 for just literally 5 seconds of doing it a different way. You take your solenoid out, it's all intact. You're going to have a gasket in there. That gasket can be put on backwards. So take a look, and you can see the way that it's in there. You know, you always want to do that before pulling the, you know, just yanking the gasket out. I don't know how many times I've had to I've fixed these markers where the gasket has been literally flipped, and my gun doesn't work, it doesn't shoot. Well, that's because the holes are now plugged. No air is going to be able to get into the solenoid, or be able to go, from anywhere else after it gets to the solenoid. Okay, so pretty much now we're down to almost a bare bones, of the A1 fly. And what you want to do is you want to take the LPR plug off the back. It just spins off. It's actually very similar to the volumizer chamber plugs on an LCD. Uses the same sizing and everything else like that. And here is something that I like to do. Not a lot of people, I've noticed do this, but this is what I do because it protects the back area of this of the gun. What I've noticed, a lot of people they'll go and they'll put something in there and they'll try to pull the LPR out. But the fact is I've got literally a straight shot now because I've taken apart the front of the gun. I've got a straight shot to be able to get that out. So what I do is I use a wooden spoon. I know it's kind of wacky, but it's wooden. It won't damage anything. So what I do is I go and I take and I put that into the into the chamber, just like that. And you can see, I push it out. You're gonna see it. It comes out just like that. It's pretty basic, pretty simple. It comes right out of the back, and it comes out in one piece. But I didn't damage anything. I mean, it's wood, and it's just smart. Then now I also have the valve in there, which same thing. What I do is usually just take it like that, and I just drop it out. It's real simple, real easy. It's not damaged. Well, at least it wasn't. But I mean, there it is. And this thing's covered in oil too, which will need a cleaning also. But there it is. The entire body is torn down, besides the pins, which if you get one and it's in really good shape and it moves and everything like that, there's no reason to take the pins out. If you notice that one's starting to get a little gummy and it won't open that well or whatever, then you're going to want to take the pins out. In order to do that, you have to remove the eye covers, minimum. You have to remove the eye covers to get to the front ones. And then the back one, obviously, with a longer, hex key. It's going to use a really small size, too. Literally, if you've got the A1, or the Angel toolkit, it's going to use one of the smaller hex keys. And I mean, you don't have to use a super long one, to get it out, but you can use, one of those. But as you can see, I've got very limited amount of turning ability. So I like to use the longer ones. I mean, for the front one, it wouldn't be that much of a problem. What it is there's two little set screws, and then the pin. That is also how you tighten up your breech. If you're noticing the breech is starting to get a little sloppy or whatever else like that. You also have the ability to take this off if you want, to clean it. That's pretty basic. You just take the screw, the lever, and the nut off, and then it just, the top collar pops off. If you want to take the bottom piece off, the easiest way, honestly, and people are probably like, oh, that's crazy, I've never really thought about that, is literally the easiest way, a butter knife. A real thin bladed butter knife will fit in between the pieces. It's a splined feed neck, in which, again, you can see right there, you could put a thin piece of metal right in there if you've got like a architectural ruler, metal ruler, or just a thin piece of metal will fit right through there, and then you can just twist this right off. Most of the time there is a little bit of Loctite, so you're not going to be able to do it by hand. I wouldn't recommend that. I would just recommend using, you know, either a butter knife or a thin piece of metal, you know, putting it in there and then just turning it. It'll come off 90% of the time. Other than that, that's pretty much how you tear down a Angel A1 fly. You know, again, I don't use anything exotic. I do use the Angel A1 SB toolkit. I recommend everybody get one that has an A1 or an SB. It's just going to make life a little bit easier because you're using the right tools rather than something you might have found in your you know, toolbox or in your you know, knick-knack drawer. You know, I use the Leatherman tool because it again, I use the pliers on the rig. I mean the ASA barrel. You know, and I use the knife point in order to, you know, pop the plug out, again, without damaging it. I mean, you know, it's pretty basic. Again, I cannot stress this enough. Look, you probably have one of these in the drawer, you know, cooking utensils or whatever else like that, or you could just go get a small dowel at the hardware store. This will save your gun compared to using almost any other kind of item. I mean, if it's not plastic or if it's not wood, you know, you're running the risk of damaging the inside of the body of your gun when you need to get the internals out. Again, I had to tell a customer a while back that his A1 was scrap because somebody had used something and gouged the back of the LPR chamber so bad that I could not get the LPR to seal. Again, I hope you enjoy this video. You know, it's pretty straightforward. If there's any questions or whatever, you can always email me at gearhead04@yahoo.com. I'm also on Facebook underneath Eastcoastangel. I frequent you know, the regular paintball forums, PB Nation, Eastcoastangel, also M. Carter Brown, Eastcoastangel too. You know, it just again, you can drop me a line if there's any questions, or if you know, you want to be able to send your gun in because this looks like it might you know, be a little bit more of a daunting task than you thought. Again, you know, I'm not going to judge you. I've done, you know, hundreds of Angels, and you know, it gets easier as you go along. Hopefully with this video you may you know, want to jump in and give it a shot. Again, thank you for tuning in.